Hey everyone, Jason Sherman here. In today's episode of Zero to CEO, I'm going to talk to entrepreneur Mark McNamee. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Jason. Thanks for having me.
And today's topic, we're talking about building a business in a war zone, because you started a company in a war zone, right? You didn't know the local language in Ukraine, and you decided, hey, I'm going to start a business in Kyiv. What is going on here? What made you do that? We're talking about a war, man, and you're like starting a business in a war zone.
Yeah, right.
What made you wake up and think that this was a good idea?
Yeah. Well, it was a little more complicated than how you just described it.
Okay.
So I have, long story short, I have professional, academic, and even personal ties to the region. So on my mother's side of the family, Ukrainian, Polish heritage, but then also my academic background. I have, in my university degree, focused on Eastern European, Russian, Ukrainian history. My graduate degrees, Russian Eurasian studies. I also
Okay.
I had lived in this region for several years, and then my professional career, I had been focused on my previous job before moving to Kyiv, Ukraine, recently. I had been focused on Eastern Europe in particular, doing political economic risk analysis for Western multinational corporations invested across Europe, but my focus was always on Eastern European
All
countries,
right.
former Soviet Union
So
countries.
you didn't wake up and just decide this on a whim. You have a huge, immense background on it for sure. My family also is from the Ukraine, so I know what you mean about having that family tie.
Mhm.
So w- you didn't speak Ukrainian or Russian, right, at the time when you started it?
So I did Russian. I actually years ago I lived in St. Petersburg in Russia and studied Russian language, but I do not know Ukrainian, and it's worth mentioning. Ukrainian and Russian are very different. Ukrainian
Yeah.
is actually closer. The language is closer in relation to Polish, for example, Slovakian
Okay.
even. So I'm in the process of studying Ukrainian, which is quite the journey here as I live here.
I can
So
imagine.
know the local language, and of course, people don't want to speak Russian here, as you can imagine, too much.
Right. So how did you navigate that? I mean, you started a business there, not knowing Ukrainian.
Hmm.
I mean, how did you get by? What were you doing?
Yeah. So, well, fortunately, I developed a good relationship with my business partner, who is Ukrainian and American by chance,
Okay.
and he runs what's called Ukraine Business News (UBN), and so we had developed a strong, well, really a strong professional relationship and friendship, and so we decided, let's launch Ukraine Business Network, so UBN Network, which is another component of UBN, which the core of the business is essentially running 4 quarterly events every year, and writing monthly reports, quarterly reports, macroeconomic forecasts. Basically, the whole idea is to help Western multinational corporations continue investing here, obviously encouraging them to increase their investment here, help with recovery and reconstruction in the country, and giving them sort of the information, understanding the external environment, forecasts for the future, how the war will develop, how the economy will develop, how the business environment will develop, and to help them make the most appropriate business
Yeah,
decisions.
and when I'm listening to you here, I mean, I'm kind of trying to zoom out because that sounds like a big macro view as to what you're doing. It's not a small business. You're trying to tackle like a world problem. So there
Oh,
must
right.
be an arsenal of critical skills necessary to do this.
Mm.
What are some of them that you've have learned are, what you need to do in order to get this done?
Sure. So my background is pretty sort of comprehensive in terms of risk analysis. So political risk,
Okay.
security risk, economic risk. So I have fairly extensive background in all those areas, and then really having a deep understanding of this region, its history, business development, domestic policies, foreign policies, geopolitical considerations, why these countries are where they are at currently. I mean, why they're at war, obviously, how the war is
Yeah.
going to play out, and obviously taking into account the sociological factors, the cultural factors, the political, economic, financial, all these different factors. And then taking into account, obviously, even China and its role, and how do they impact Russia and the
Right.
West
Yeah,
relations? Not to mention, of
Because
course,
China has ties
Western,
with Russia, right? So
right? Western policy. So, I mean, as you know, it's been hard to sleep the last several months. Worried
oh,
about U.S. money coming in, and what's Congress going to do, and all
And
this. And
we're in election year, so there's a lot is at stake from what I'm reading, and a lot is up in the air. I mean, then we also have the Israel conflict, the Palestine
yeah,
and Gaza. So there's like multiple kind of wars happening at the same time. Seems like World War III to me. Is this are we in World War III?
it's
And I mean,
so I don't like
plus we had the pandemic that kind of destroyed everything too before everything
yeah,
happened, right?
exactly.
So
So World War III is a strong way to put it because we would need all the major powers actively involved, boots on the ground. But what I would say, and what I've been saying since February 24th, 2022, when Putin launched the invasion, is that we are in the middle, and we seem to be unaware of it in the United States and in Western Europe, that we are in the middle of a transitional shift in the global order. The world is not going to be the same. Right. So we saw this in our lives, 1989, Berlin Wall coming down, end of
right.
the Soviet Union, 89, 99, those years, obviously a transitional shift. And it was very clear we're moving into a
Yes.
new
The
era.
Cold War was
That
ending.
Cold War, and then now that post Cold War order decisively ended on February 24th, 2022. We don't quite seem to understand this in the West. China, Russia, and Asia, African nations, they see this and they're thrilled and they're eager to move into this new era, while the West is still living in the last 35, 40 years, sort of thinking things will just naturally kind of continue as they had been because that's how it was for no other reason, right?
Seems
But that's
unlikely to
why
me.
I mean, watching history unfold. This is literally sitting, November 1989 at the Berlin Wall, or sitting,
Yeah,
in
it's
the
very
late
vivid.
40s in Germany and watching the Cold War start to take off.
Yeah, and you're saying people don't really know about what's happening, right? And so let's kind of talk about China's ties with Russia
Mm.
and what it means for politics and business because you're saying nobody really is everyone's oblivious to it. So tell us about it.
Right. Well, so starting, I suppose, with China, the positive news is that China and Russia, for all of the last couple of years, we've seen this closer relationship. So first of all, I think it has more to do with Putin and Xi than it does with Russia and China, who have for 500 years been pretty hostile enemies and have fought numerous wars against each other. But in general terms, Putin's regime is really trying to just destroy the Western-led order that we've become familiar with the last 40 years. China doesn't want that. China got extraordinarily rich off of the Western-led
Yes,
order
they did.
over the last 40 years. So China would like to revise it on its own terms and take a more of a leadership role, but they don't want to shatter the glass the way Russia is doing that. So there actually are some sort of natural
Okay.
dissimilarities between their outlook and their
Some good
strategy.
news. Some good news.
So yeah, right. They don't want to destroy it as much as Russia does.
That
so
that that is good
uh,
news. So I mean, some of the stuff that you're doing over there has to do with like networking, building connections. Maybe there's workforce, going on development. So how do you see that over there? Because we don't think about that over here. Like you keep mentioning the West, like we think about more working with India or working with South America or working in Canada or America, like a lot of people that we hire. So how can you tell people like there's actionable stuff you can do here in Ukraine?
in Ukraine. So, well, first of all, I mean, if you think about serving these markets, right? All the Western companies, if they look at the global level, a couple of things. One, European markets are still, even though they're growing at 1%, maybe 2%, they're massively rich countries and they have rule of law and they're saturated to a degree, yes, but extremely attractive. When you look at the rest of the world, is only growing on average by about 3%. So, these major countries growing at that level is positive and attractive. When you think about Ukraine specifically, you have to think the amount of money that's coming into this country, right? You have a country of before the war around 40 million people, right? Highly skilled, determined to move west, right? And they border on, frankly, when you're talking to global CEOs for the last several years, Central European countries, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania. These are the most stable, strongest, most robust markets, emerging markets in the world,
Hmm.
some of the most attractive for countries. Now you add Ukraine to that list on top of it. And then secondly, this is going to be the Marshall Plan. This is going to dwarf the Marshall Plan. You have to think the Marshall Plan was coming from the United States, divided up between several nations. This is now going to be massive amounts of money, public money from the United States and the EU, plus on a
Right.
bilateral basis, other countries, plus all the international organizations, IMF, World Bank, plus private investors, and it's all for one country, Ukraine. So the
That sounds
opportunity here.
when yeah, when you're putting it that way, it sounds like the business ecosystem over there is huge. How do you harness the talent? Like, how do you get involved with that? Like, it's people don't really know how to get involved.
This is the thing actually. So at the moment, I mean, we came in very early.
Okay.
The war outlook at the moment, obviously, my business partner Andrew Prima and I were very optimistic for Ukraine's long-term future, but we got in early intentionally as the war. I mean, where we're sitting at today, the war looks like Russia enjoys more advantages. We do believe long-term, when you sort of look, beneath the surface here, that Ukraine is going to win. It's a matter of time. Western support is going to be enough to allow Ukraine to win, in quotation marks, in some fashion, which then will allow reconstruction and recovery to take off. So that being the case, the opportunity is going to pick up, but it's not quite there now. And when you think about talent, when I mean, in talking to companies every single day, all of our clients and prospects, just a couple of quick things. One, the very positive thing is that Western companies, to their credit, really have invested considerably in the labor market here, right?
Okay.
They've worked
Which
with and
which
trained
which areas exactly?
across the board. We work with clients in B2C, retail, B2B, industrials, IT, healthcare, uh,
Everything. Okay.
every professional services, consulting,
Okay.
really across the entire board. But uh, they are, but very positively. I mean, even maybe at some loss, they're willing to continue to support these teams because,
Right.
one, they want to keep and retain solid talent. Two, they do feel a humanitarian sort of
Of
motivation to help.
course.
And then three, very just business practicality. They have the view that we're going to be in Ukraine. It's a massive market. There's massive resources, very strong labor market. And so we're going to be here for 10, 20, 50 years. So difficult now. Let's
Right.
make, and the conversations I'm having are about companies wanting to be sort of the first mover. What's the sign I should look for to get ahead of the competition? Because all this money's coming in and every competitor in the world is going to be here and tossing in millions. We got to be the one. We can't leave,
That makes
obviously, and we
sense.
want to move first, right?
Sounds like a race almost, right? Who's going to get there first and who's going to make a bigger impact
Yeah, in
and
a way,
establish themselves, right?
yeah.
Because you're
I
right.
would say it's a marathon, and we're at about mile 10 right now. But
Yeah,
yes,
because you're right. Because there's how many companies in the world? I can't even imagine how many there are, millions,
mm,
and everyone's always trying to get talent, and there's only a certain amount of talented people out there. There's a lot of, beginner people and
mm,
intermediate, mediocre people, but then the really good pool of talent is really hard to get, and they're working for the bigger companies or starting their own businesses. So
right.
how do you help? I mean, I'm assuming what you guys do is help attract and connect to that larger pool of talent, like the
Yeah.
better, right? Is that what it?
And
Of
you have to also think the language barrier. So you're already
course,
eliminating the vast majority of local talent. And also, you're not going to be importing many people who want to come live and work in Ukraine at the moment. So,
right.
so you're kind of limiting yourself to, well, who knows English well enough, right? And understands Western business practices and things like this. But what you're talking about is actually the biggest concern, because you have to think with
Right.
mobilization, how many men were taken out of the labor market. So this is for the last 6 months, this has been the biggest issue for companies. It's not necessarily demand. Some in many companies, demand, their sales are actually better in 2023 than they were before the war, right?
Wow.
Crazy enough, for various reasons, but
Right. Sure.
so they have problems in keeping up with demand because they don't have, in many cases, they don't have the labor to do it. Labor costs are going up. So yeah, answer your question directly. What are they doing? Conversations we're having every day, they're doing really, really interesting, innovative things to basically retain and attract talent. So something, obviously, amid the uncertainty and the war, people value the security and stability of a job and believing and knowing I'm here today, and in 1 year I will still be here, and I have the support of this company. So companies are doing a lot of things to develop corporate culture, training and education, a lot of additional benefits, mental health programs. You have to think
Right.
the whole country is being bombed, and
It's
so these
huge.
people with their families, so they're doing lots of things, providing services with psychologists. And then also, I mean, it'll sound strange to a Western audience, but they do corporate days, right? So we do corporate days in the United States or in Europe, and I don't know what we do. We
Yeah.
do
No.
this
I Yeah, no,
human
I hear you.
triangles or whatever
Yeah,
we do, these little things.
sure.
I mean, just an example, I heard from a
Motivational
company.
stuff.
Yeah, an example I recently heard from a company. They got together and had somebody come in and teach them how to build drones. So then they all spent the day, built a number of drones, and sent them to the front lines.
That's awesome. And
So
so
things
is
like
it
that, right?
is this what the Ukraine Business Network does? Is can you give us like a wrap up on what you guys do and how people can find out more about you and support you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Ukraine Business Network is focused on, as I mentioned earlier, helping basically our mission is to help Ukraine's recovery and ultimately the reconstruction, encouraging and assisting Western multinational companies to further invest here and help them navigate and understand the external environment, best business practices. We do benchmarking survey reports so you get a good feel for the sentiment in the market. And then we write monthly reports, quarterly reports on the outlook for Ukraine, looking at the war outlook, Western money, inflation, interest rates, how businesses are performing, things like this. And then our core product are the 4 quarterly events that we hold at the one of the largest convention centers here in downtown Kyiv, which are attended by 100 to 120 executives from the top Western companies.
Wow.
And yeah, we discuss basically on a quarterly basis the outlook, hear from government ministers, hear from the top business executives of how things are going and what to do and what not to do in the
And it sounds amazing. And how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can go to our website at ubn.news. Ubn.com. So go there first, and then there's UBN Network as well. So that's all available. And then, of course, feel free to email me at m.mcnamee, so MCNAMEE at ubn.news.
Perfect, guys. Check it out. The Ukraine Business Network. This is incredible. Support them. Support our Ukrainian
Thank you.
people. And see you guys in the next episode.